Yeah, we can start. So people will also be joining at the same time. So we can start right now because it's already over 10. So hello and assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you so much for taking out your time for this meeting and joining us for this important project that we'll be having in the future. So as you can see the slide, it is evident from the name, the future of non-profit financial reporting for Afghanistan stakeholders. So overall, the introduction part of this project will be more briefed by Samantha, who is also joining with us. I will just I really welcome you all for this meeting and joining us. This is incredibly an important project that we'll be working on along with all our stakeholders that we have in Afghanistan. So overall, like it's a global kind of project that will be affecting the NPO sector around the world. So starting from the first slide, I just want to give you a few tips on setup of this meeting, that virtual meeting that we have. Please let me know, is everyone listening me, hearing me well? Hello? Hello, Sam, are you there? Hello, Sam, can you hear me?
I can, sorry, my internet went. Do carry, just reshare the slides.
Okay, if you could kindly share the slides so that we can go ahead with along with the slides.
Can you see my screen now, Zia?
Yeah, I can. So there are certain tips for the on slide 1 with relates to this online meeting that we have. There is use presenter view, launch slideshow. So you can see all these things on the screen. Can you move to the second slide, Samantha?
This one, or I move along? Zia, it's okay? I think Zia now might have lost his internet. So let me speak through the Zoom controls a little bit. So you might find that speaker view is more useful as we go through the, and then later on when we break out into small groups, the gallery view will be more helpful. The bottom of your screen, or if you tap or swipe your mobile, and on that you can use the chat to reach out to anybody else in the room or to the presenters if you need to. You can also stop and start your video and mute and unmute yourself. Right now, go into the small group sessions. That will be the right time to move to gallery view and start your video and unmute so that you can discuss with your other colleagues. Also, when we come, it would be good to use the raise hand function to report back. So you do that by going into participants. If you click on participants in the control panel, there's the option to raise or lower your hand. Zia, I wonder if you are there, if you can hear me or if you're speaking.
Yeah, I can hear you now. I just ended up my video because the internet was not stable. So yeah, as
Oh, I see. So
Samantha,
you carry on, Zia.
yeah, as Samantha mentioned, the Zoom tips. So we are excited actually to welcome you to this webinar about the IFR for NPO. IFR mean International Financial Reporting for non-profit organization sector. So it doesn't mean that only NGO sector that we have. We have lots of other non-profit organizations like universities, hospitals. If you so, like this project is all related to the whole NPO sector. And the thing is how it is relevant for stakeholders in Afghanistan. Firstly, I will introduce myself. My name is Ziaul Haq Sarwari, and I am the country champion for IFR for NPO, International Financial Reporting Standards for non-profit organization. So I'm leading this in Afghanistan, and my role is to ensure that stakeholders in Afghanistan are aware of the project and encourage you to participate in and have your say on this. Currently, I'm working with Save the Children as the country finance director. So it's a very good opportunity for me to meet with all other NPO sectors as well. We are also joined by Samantha Masuki, who is the project director for this from Humantum. You will hear us the term NPO a lot, non-profit organization. Many NPOs are NGOs, but there are NPOs that are not NGOs. So NPO is more inclusive in this presentation that you will be hearing from us. Sam, can we move to next slide so that we are on the same page? So,
which slide would you like?
The third one, where so yeah, this one, yeah. So this event is meeting rather than a training sort of webinar. Although we online rather than in person, we have built in time for small group discussions and use of the chat functions to encourage interaction, discussion, and feedback. Overall, we will have 2 hours altogether, as you can see, and there are 2 blocks of short presentations with a small group discussion and feedback in between. You might be wondering, why do we have a picture of NPO in the background? So as we discuss issues of financial reporting for NPOs, we would like to keep in mind that NPO financial reports have little meaning apart from the context of the great work that NPOs do around the world, and here in Afghanistan also. So like NPOs, they're like covering lots of sectors. If you see in health and social services, education and research, environmental protection, development, advocacy, religion, culture, recreation, and more. So NPOs is a very broad kind of term, which is not like strict to a specific area. So before we start, let's find out who we have with us today. This meeting was overall like for all the educational institutes, for the largely for the non-governmental organizations, which are NGOs in Afghanistan, and the audit firms. So we are being like joined by multiple sectors people, like there are people from audit firms, there are people from the NGO sector, there are people from different universities, and we have some high ranking people as well from some of the ministries. We have We have with us from CP Afghanistan Sanaullah, who is leading the professional standards department and certified professional accountants of Afghanistan under the Ministry of Finance. So I will be hearing lots of advices and suggestions from Sanaullah as well. We are also having the acting head of CP Afghanistan, Abdul Wahid Dilawar from CP Afghanistan. He has also joined us on this call. We are also being joined by some other very important people from Afghanistan, from audit firms, you name it, from ministries, from UNICEF. We have Sibratullah Taban, who has also joined us. So thanks everyone for being here with us, and we hope that this information session or this informative session would be really useful for all of you, and you can have your saying on this because overall it relates to somehow to our organizations and the accounting field that we have. So we'll be hearing lots of things from you, suggestions that how we can incorporate and how we can move forward. Let me introduce you to Samantha Mosuki, who is the project director for this project, who is dealing overall the international financial reporting standards for the NPO sector around the world. So she's leading this project, and we are prestige to have her. Let me have a brief biodata of her. She is a UK chartered accountant, qualified with Mazars in 2000, specializing in charity audits, moved to Uganda in 2001, and she is having various roles in non-profit sector, like auditor, CFO, grant management advisor, board member, and treasurer, as well as carrying out training and consultancy assignments across Africa. She has been an associate with Humantum since 2004 and became regional director East Africa in 2017 before taking on the role of director of the IFR for NPO project in 2019. So moving ahead, this was a short information of the project director of this. Moving ahead, we'll have 20 minutes to introduce you to the to IFR for NPO project. And apologies to those who may already be familiar with it, but hopefully this will be a quick reminder and make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to the later parts of the meeting. So we are looking forward to have your presence in the meeting throughout this call. And believe me, this is one of a very important area where lots of problems of the donor reporting for NPOs, the financial reporting standards, will be like countering all those problems in the future. So your voice, your suggestion is really important, and we hope that we'll continue to engage with you people in this project. So I will leave here to Samantha, and she will take us forward within this presentation. So Sam, over to you now.
Thank you so much, Zia. I hope. Thank you for that kind introduction, and we're so grateful to Zia for taking on this role of being the country champion for IFR for NPO for Afghanistan as well. I thought we'd start by playing a short video. It's only 2.5 minutes long, and it's available on our website, and it's a great way to understand the project. So hopefully this will play. Super. Well, I hope that has just given you a sense of how exciting and important this project is. Now, one question that I'm often asked is, which type of NPO financial reports is this project developing guidance for? As Zia mentioned, I will be using this term NPO quite a lot. In Afghanistan, I'm guessing many of you use the NGO, but obviously there are many types of non-profit aren't NGOs. So that's why you might hear this phrase. And I'm sorry if it doesn't feel like it resonates with you immediately, but hopefully you'll get used to it. So which types of financial reports of NPOs are we talking about? And it's really important that we get this right. So if we think about all the transactions of an NPO, the accounting system classifies and summarizes those transactions to produce all these different financial. So some of those reports are internal, they're for internal managers, decision making. Some of those are for donors. So if it implements a donor funded project, quite often those donors require purpose reports about that project's finances in particular. And then thirdly, every year, the organization should produce its own annual audit accounts or general purpose financial statements. They're kind of for everybody. And all of these reports should come out of one accounting system. So for Connect, we're focusing on these general purpose financial statements and the accompanying narrative reports. Now, of course, these different types of reports are connected because they're created from the same source of transactions, or some of them, the same accounting system. So we can't pretend that our year-end reporting is entirely divorced from our project or donor reporting. And for that reason, Humentum is also working on another project to harmonize donor project reporting formats. That's slightly a story for another day, but just to make the key point that we're not talking about project reports, but we are not ignoring them, and we're not pretending that that's not another important issue. So I hope that clarifies which financial reports this particular guidance will be handling. So the second thing for us to look at really is which stakeholders are being considered while we're thinking about this project. We're really responding to challenges expressed by three broad groups of stakeholders. Are the users or the readers of the financial statements. And if we think about general purpose financial statements, they aim to meet the needs of a really wide range of users. So that includes donors who are interested in the entity-wide financial statements, as well as just their particular project. But it's also others like regulators, service users or beneficiaries, clients, members, as well as banks, the public, collaborating partners, suppliers and staff. So there's a really broad brush of needs that different users have. So as we mentioned, within this group, large donors are particularly influential because they can have compliance requirements and rules about the donor funding, about the way we do our accounting and the way those reports are generated. So if the requirements of the IF or MPO guidance actively conflicting requirements, that could cause real problems for MPOs. And yet donors themselves are some of the biggest advocates for wanting this project to go ahead. So for that reason, the IFR for MPO project, we've engaged a donor reference group. Meet with them twice a year. It's quite new. The first meeting will be in January, and we're trying to make sure we get a really wide range of donors from the US, from Europe, from Asia, from all over, so that we have really good conversation and dialogue with that very influential group. Now, the second group of stakeholders are those who prepare financial statements, the non-profits themselves. And it's really important that we have there's a kind of cost benefit, isn't it? Any benefits to users, for example, extra information or ways of analyzing or presenting information, that might have a benefit to users, but it might have a cost to preparers. It might be onerous or burdensome or difficult. So we always need to balance those interests so that with the benefits to users are balanced with the costs to preparers. Then the third group of stakeholders are auditors, and I think we have some auditors in the room, those who provide assurance about whether the financial statements present a true and fair view. Now, auditors are often at that really front line of supporting MPOs to implement and apply applicable accounting standards and guidance. So much as they're not users or preparers, sometimes they're helping the preparers and they're supporting them in doing their job of preparing financial statements. So they're a really, really key group for this project. I should say, as a project, we don't actually represent any particular group. We're just keen to develop guidance that balances the costs and benefits to all the different stakeholders so that overall we get something that works for everybody. So what is this project actually going to deliver? What change are we hoping to bring about? Well, if we look at some of the current problems, many of the challenges that are expressed by stakeholders stem from this core problem that there is no internationally applicable standard to prepare their annual financial statements. Where countries don't have their own national standards, like Uganda, where I live, like Afghanistan, and many others, there's about 20 countries that do have their own national standards, and that leaves a good 159 others or more that don't. So where there's no national standard, that can lead to inconsistency within the same jurisdiction or country, because we're following standards that are written for a different context to give us the guidance that we need. And then if you think of larger NPOs, international ones, if we get inconsistency between countries, that makes consolidation really difficult and expensive. Those different issues. Then for funders, when they look at the financial statements, they find it hard to assess the financial capability or to understand the wider context for a particular project. For example, at the moment, there's no agreed way to even how income is measured. And income is one of the easiest ways to assess size. And size is an easy way to assess capacity to absorb grants, for example, just at the macro level. And even something as simple as size, there's no really easy way to measure that. So what that does, point of view, is it makes the we get these expensive and duplicative processes for due diligence, reporting and auditing. We're doing the same things lots of times in different ways, and it's expensive for funders, and it's time and effort as well for grantees. So what this lack of clarity and consistency ultimately reduces the transparency in the sector, and that makes funders nervous. One nervous about is double funding fraud. That's when, you know, the one NPO will claim the same expense from 2 different donors. And that's actually really hard to spot given the current focus that we have on project-based reports. The solution that we are aiming to produce, if I can find, yes, there we are. The solution that we're wanting to provide is this internationally applicable guidance for how NPOs should prepare their annual general purpose financial reports. Now, it would be up to any particular country. So, for example, in Afghanistan, the Ministry of Economy has the authority to decide whether to adopt or to align to this guidance, whether certain NPOs within their jurisdiction should be required or allowed to follow it. So it's up to each jurisdiction, but then also funders can also recognize it as best practice and encourage their grantees to use it where entities are allowed to. You don't want, certainly don't want more conflicts of donors requiring one thing and regulators another. So it's really regulators who have the role of saying, yes, you may adopt it, and donors the role of encouraging it and promoting it as best practice. So the future outcomes and benefits are really wide-ranging. So for NPOs themselves who are applying the guidance, that they'll be better able to demonstrate their capacity and attract funds. It puts you in front of a wider audience. It increases your credibility. And internally as well, it should also support the provision of more decision useful information for governance and for management. Now, for funders, it contributes to better and more efficient governance, and that's obviously a win for NPOs as well. And having clear guidance simplifies and improves the value of audit assurance as well. Then one of the other really important outcomes from this project, kind of separate from the guidance itself, is the creation of a global community of stakeholders who are able to engage and collaborate to solve sector-wide issues. And this kind of thing hasn't really existed before. And that's what we're hoping to create, this community, through this project. So ultimately, I believe that this guidance will contribute to a more resilient and accountable sector that's better able to generate and utilize funds to achieve their social, environmental purpose. Now, so that's the big picture of what we're hoping to deliver. So who's behind this project? Well, it's being implemented by 2 organizations in partnership, Humentum and CIPFA. So Humentum, I work for Humentum. It's a global nonprofit that convenes NPO professionals and inspires sector-wide change. And one of our key areas of focus is financial management. And then we've partnered with CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. And that is UK based, and it has a standard setting role for local government and charities in the UK, but it also plays an important role as an international convener on public sector accounting issues. So both Humentum and CIPFA are ourselves NPOs. And between us, we are well connected to a really broad range of stakeholders within the sector that are critical to this project. So this really is by the sector, for the sector. Now, the seed funding to enable the project to launch has been provided by the Open Society Foundations and the Ford Foundation. But the project isn't fully funded, and we don't want to be, or seem to be, funded. We want to be really global in our funding sources, as well as all the engagement that we do. So we're looking to raise funds from elsewhere as well. So that's who is delivering. Now, as well as the project team, which is actually really small, I'm a director for Humentum. We have a comms support, and then CIPFA has one main key person. And then we have the chair of the TAG and the PAG, who I'm about to explain to you. So the project team is really small, but we have this amazing of global advisors, which is what gives us our strength, if you like. And they offer their perspectives and expertise on a voluntary basis. So the technical advisory group, you can see on the left there, that comprises national standard setters from 5 continents. They're the ones to be IFRS. They're also official observers on that group, and they're watching very closely. So you can see that we have the usual big players, Hello, everybody. I'm really sorry, my internet failed. Can you hear me now? Could somebody give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Yes, great. Sorry about that. Let's start again on the screen share. Just a moment. Bear with me. Right, okay. So yes, I was telling you about the practitioner advisory group who are there to make sure that the ideas proposed by the technical advisory group are really practical and can wash. And maybe I'll turn my video off so that you get better sound. Let me try that. Okay. Now, information about each of these members and the details of all the meetings can be found on the project website. The process is totally transparent, nothing secret about it. Let me keep moving on. So in terms of the when and the how, we're using a 3-phase process, which is equivalent to all other standard setting processes. I hope you can still hear me. Yes. So phase 1 of the consultation, phase 1 of the project is this consultation phase. And the key output from that is called a consultation paper, which presents questions for structured input from stakeholders. And we're going to talk about that later on in this session. That's going to be issued in January 2021. The second phase of the development process is this development phase. Phase 2 is the development phase, where we analyze the feedback from the consultation and use that as evidence base to develop draft guidance, which is then exposed for comment. So it's called an exposure draft of the guidance, and that should be available mid-2023. And then the third phase takes stock of the feedback from the exposure draft, puts through final changes, and then we'll launch the final guidance expected in early 2025. Now, developing the guidance itself is really the beginning, because the benefits will be felt only after it's widely adopted and used. And that's why there are two key aspects of the IFR for MPO project design. So one aspect is this technical rigor applied in the guidance development process led by SIPFA. And the other aspect is this stakeholder engagement, which is being led by Humentum. We're actively reaching out to stakeholders all over the world. That's regulators, national accountancy organizations and institutes, donors and MPOs, so that all stakeholders can participate in the development process. The idea is that by the time the guidance is ready, everyone should be ready and willing to adopt it. We're not starting from scratch by the time we get to 2025. So how are we doing in terms of outreach? Well, the project has already got engagement from people all over the world. So those countries that you can see in blue are those where individuals have signed up and registered their interest in the project. And when we look at what types of people are they, they're a really broad range. We've got international and local non-profits, they're auditors, accountancy bodies, regulators, donors, and others. So we're really glad, and we're keeping on increasing the number of people in each country and the number of countries that are engaging. The yellow flags on the map show members of the technical advisory group. The red flags show the members of the practitioner advisory group. And the black flags are the various country champions. And you can see Zia there in Afghanistan. And those country champions are working to engage stakeholders in those countries to ensure their voices are heard. So having heard that introduction about the project, now is the chance to meet some of the other people here and share some of your questions and thoughts in smaller groups. We're going to be using a Zoom feature called Breakout Rooms. And once the rooms are launched, you'll see, you'll just be sent to a new Zoom room where you should see 5 or 6, 7 other people. So we'll go through the questions that you need to discuss, and I'll also post them into your new rooms. It will work much better if you're able to have your videos and microphones on for that small group conversation. If you have any problems, you can use this feature called, you can ask the host to come to your breakout room, and I can come and help you if you need it, but I'm sure you'll be fine. We're going to try and give you 20-25 minutes, and when there's about 3 minutes left to go, I'll give you a bit of a warning, and then at the time to finish, you'll be sort of pulled back automatically into the main meeting. So once you get into your small groups, everyone should briefly greet each other, introduce yourselves, get to know each other a little bit, not for too long, just so that you know who you're with. Then the first thing to discuss really is what questions or comments have come to mind from that introductory presentation. Is there anything that you'd like clarification about? And then after you've had that conversation, you can discuss either question 3 or question 4. It's really up to you to decide. There might not be time to discuss both, but if you can, that's also fine. So question 3 is around the benefits. So how might NPOs, regulators, auditors, donors in Afghanistan benefit from the guidance? From where you're sitting and from what you've heard, how can you see Afghanistan benefiting from this guidance? And then the last question is, what challenges can you see as a stakeholder in Afghanistan? What might be the challenges to participation, to engagement, to adoption? And how might those challenges be overcome, if possible? Now, when your time is up, you'll automatically be brought back, and then if you could select a spokesperson who will have a chance to share some of the ideas on your behalf. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to turn on my video. I hope people could hear that and that we're okay there. So I'm going to create the breakout rooms. I think we'll just have 2 rooms. And I'm just setting these up. And I'm going to create the rooms now. So Zia, are there anything you want to add or any questions before I create these breakout rooms? It's okay. Oh, let me unmute you. I think I'll also want to unmute participants because I don't want you to not be able to speak. Allow participants to unmute
Yeah,
themselves.
while entering the room, if you unmute them as well, the other people, so that they can have.
Yeah, I've now enabled unmute, so people should be able to unmute themselves. Great, so we shall see you in about 25 minutes. I hope you have a good chance to discuss questions and comments. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had a chance to have a good discussion. I think people are still joining.
Yeah, Sam. Yeah, we had a very good discussion. We were joined by Atal Bahan, who is actually one of the managing partners of one of the leading firms of national firms of Afghanistan, Linkside. So we had quite a useful discussion. We were also joined by Abdul Wahid, the acting head of CP Afghanistan, and Sanaullah, who is the head of professional standards in CP Afghanistan. So we were discussing the way forward. We were discussing some issues, and we have selected Atal Bahan as the presenter of our room. So he will be sharing thoughts shortly.
Thank you so much, Zia. Atal, you're welcome. Do you want to unmute yourself and maybe first share with us a couple of questions or comments initially, rather than the benefits and challenges, just some questions or reactions that you had in your group. You're welcome, Atal.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much. First of all, I couldn't hear your voice because there was a lot of distortion. Can you repeat your question?
Oh, so I'm so sorry. Just would you share with us a couple of comments or questions that were discussed in your group? Not yet the benefits or challenges, just the questions and reactions to the presentation initially.
Well, the overall response from the participants was very positive because we are facing a lot of the international financial reporting standards in Afghanistan, whether it's an NGO or a private limited company or an international company operating in Afghanistan. So overall, the comments and the reactions were very positive. The participants also added a very fruitful comments and helpful comments for us to begin with. And we discussed some ideas that where we should begin with and how should we structure the discussion within ourselves to come up with something so we can, from Afghanistan, contribute something to the standard setting.
Do continue, Atal. You're breaking up a little bit, but do carry on.
Okay, so that was the overall response in our group, and we basically discussed the root cause issues. We begin with the regulators, which brought us some questions about the lack of reporting and auditing requirements enforced by the regulator. In Afghanistan, we discussed two regulating authorities. The third is obviously CPA Afghanistan, who regulates the profession of accountancy, but mainly for providing operating licenses to the NGOs. So we thought to consider the issue from the very basic level from their end. So the law is very brief, given the NGOs and non-profit organizations. So we about the law, which must be implemented by all the organizations under the umbrella of not-for-profit organizations in Afghanistan. The second issue is the very little number of qualified accountants in Afghanistan, and very few of them are in the practice who completely can understand and implement the standards in Afghanistan in different organizations. The third is the implementing NGOs themselves, the local NGOs or the international NGOs operating in Afghanistan. We have to make them aware of how these standards work, so they can give the priority to proper reporting. I wanted to add something, but I couldn't the group because we had a very short time period, is the issue of ethics. We as an ACCA students, members or affiliates, we are very much familiar with the code of ethics of IFAC and ACCA. But some other professionals who come from other backgrounds, but they know accountancy, they are not much familiar with ethics, like the issues of independence, the issues of confidentiality, the other elements of the ethical code of conduct. So we have to spread some awareness when we work on the standards. Then some other participants also added very useful comments about mobilizing to develop something which is very detailed given the text of Afghanistan, and spreading awareness after that, and educating the individuals or the organizations as required. So we are very hopeful, and we see this as a value addition in Afghanistan and overall. Our life easier very much as an auditors and accountants.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
The overall.
Okay, so the things I'm picking up here, some of the challenges with regulators and lack of requirements, even the basis of accessing licenses, there's few qualified accountants, there's the issue of awareness, mobilization, getting something detailed and context for the Afghanistan environment. You mentioned the issue of ethics as well. But overall, very positive and sort of positive reaction. There's some energy and excitement about seeing this for NPOs in Afghanistan. And actually, these challenges are echoing. I'm hearing similar challenges from many different countries. So having the guidance is important, and it's one thing, but it's certainly not a magic bullet, or a silver, whatever the phrase is, a silver bullet that will magically solve a lot of more systemic structural challenges. And that is certainly something that we need to bear in mind. The capacity constraints as well, we're hearing that from India, from across Africa. It's really important that this guidance will be simple enough that it can cater for small and medium non-profit organizations. You shouldn't need to have 10 qualified chartered accountants in your finance department just to be able to understand it. So I think that's something that we're also hearing from many different places, and that's really important for me to be able to take that back to the tag and really take that message home. That's really helpful. Were there any questions in particular, Atal, in addition to all those lovely comments and suggestions and perspectives? Were there any questions that came up? Or Zia was able to answer them all?
Yeah, most of the questions at this stage were answered by Sarvari Saab, Mr. Zia. But I felt that the participants were enthusiastic that we should be provided with guidance or instructions that where should we begin with.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you. Sana has raised his hand. Sana, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Atal. So I understood what was the most challenging and problems here for the implementation. One thing that I can add is that if you can write down what you were notes in, is that we need to align the regulator and the donor requirement. We need to align them, because what currently the regulation of Ministry of Economy is requiring is vague. I mean, they say that international standards, but donors sometimes say use IFRS. The donors sometimes requires from auditors to do this, the audit of the financial statements of an NPO based on GAAP, based on IFRS, and sometimes they use ISRSA, some other Australian standards. So these different, there is no common platform or guideline for, of course, for not preparing the financial statements, as well as for their audit. Some of the
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, some of the donors require to do the audit based on GAAP. Some of them requires based on ISAS. So this should be uniform. I believe this should be uniform. The regulator, the government, and the donor should all three agree on two set of accountants for preparing and for the auditing, because the NGO will be burdened if the donor requires them to prepare based on IFRS for NPOs, and the government wants them to prepare based on IFRSs. So what I would suggest here is we can talk, and Mr. Zia could talk with the regulators here, so they could be in the same uniform guideline of all three parties. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think that's going to be so important, isn't it? And as you say, at the moment, there's IFRS, but it doesn't really talk about grants, and it doesn't talk about a lot of the types of transactions and issues that we have in NPOs. We have IPSAS. I know Ethiopia, for example, has made IPSAS applicable for all their nonprofits, but IPSAS is for governments. It also doesn't really work. It's not applicable. So that's why we really need something that's actually written for this sector. And then I think if regulators are brought on board, it should be relatively easy for them to say, here's something that actually fits, rather than this generic term gap, which maybe doesn't quite refer to anything in particular, or IFRS or IPSAS. We can actually refer to guidance that really speaks to our needs. So that's the hope. Let me move on to, we've just got a few more minutes before I want to move on to the next stage of the meeting. The other group, Galaxy, Mirwais, I'm not sure who was in that other group. When I joined them, they weren't, I'm not sure if their audio was working. Is there anybody from the other group who'd like to share some of your thoughts or observations? No? Okay, well, if you didn't have a chance to share and you have got comments or questions, but the audio didn't work or something, please do put them in the chat, type them now, and we will try and address those in the follow-up email. And also do reach out to Zia as your country champion. He's your sort of first point of contact for those types of questions and comments, even if you hadn't a chance to share today. So if that's all right, I'm keen to move on to the next part. There will be time for more questions at the end as well, but I thought it'd be really good for you to meet and discuss how this is in your context, right from the word go. So let me share. Great. So after that small group discussion, the next thing we're going to move on now is to have a closer look at this consultation process that's going to happen and be launched next year in January. So we're going to look at who should participate and why. What does this consultation process look like? What is the consultation paper? How practically do we respond? So the who, well, everybody here is invited to participate. We're particularly interested to hear the views of regulators, because as you have pinpointed, they are very important stakeholders. If a regulator in a given jurisdiction doesn't allow or require their NPOs to use the guidance, the NPOs can't just choose to do it by themselves. So we really would love to hear regulators' views. so that we can prepare and generate something that will meet their needs. If regulators can input into the consultation process, we can make sure that we can develop something that acknowledges that input. Then auditors are a very important group, especially auditors of NPO entity level financial statements, but also those who do donor funded reports, grant report audits. Then funders, if there are funders in Afghanistan or the Afghanistan offices of international funders at the front line of awarding grants and doing due diligence, what would meet their needs? And then obviously NPOs, so the senior finance staff from within NPOs themselves, and institutes. I think you would come with the regulators because you advise them. But then the why. So obviously if we don't get input from Afghanistan, the cultural context in Afghanistan won't be reflected in what our understanding is from the project point of view. And we need the needs and realities of different stakeholders in Afghanistan to be put forward so that they can be reflected in the proposals, your stakeholders' needs. And I think, as you've mentioned, this is a really exciting opportunity to shape the future, and future generations of Afghans can look back at the input that you've given and thank you for creating something or inputting to something that's fit for purpose. Staying silent and then ending up with something we don't like is, I guess, like not voting and then complaining when we don't get the leaders we don't want. So please, we really would love you to engage. And then the fourth reason is it's slightly more project-based, but to build the credibility of the project. So if we have, 1,000 people send in comments from 150 countries, it gives us a strong evidence base for drafting. It brings credibility to the project that will ultimately result in wider adoption. If we only get feedback from 10 people, it doesn't give us the credibility as a project, and it doesn't give the standard and the guidance, the credibility it needs. So we need quality feedback and also quantity, and from all countries and different types of stakeholders. So let's have a look at this consultation paper. The consultation process is shaped by this document called the consultation paper. It's still in the final stages of development, but it's around 200 pages. So I wanted to help you understand how it's structured so that we can get our head around it. So after the executive summary, there's a preface, which I think has actually been recently renamed to be an introduction. So it's just an introduction, which sets out the objectives for the project, and explains who should respond to the consultation paper and how. And it's just short, sort of essential background reading. Then the bulk of the paper and all the questions that we'll be looking for your feedback on are in these two main sections, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 looks at sort of landscape level overview issues, and part 2 takes a close look at some specific accounting and reporting issues. Then the supplementary information is provided to give more context about the project. It's also got annexes that show the treatment by each of the international standards where relevant, or the national. So some of the countries that have existing standards, how do they treat this issue, kind of for techie reference. That's in this, the supplementary information. And then the glossary explains the meaning of some of the terms as used in the consultation paper. There is a lot of difference in the way that the same term can be used in one country and another sometimes. Designated funds, is that the same as restricted? Is general the same as unrestricted? There's just a lot of different terms that are used without any global shared meaning. So this glossary isn't intending to be the new definition. It's just that as you read the consultation paper, the meaning as intended is in the glossary, so that we can try and reduce confusion over interpretation. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to take a deeper look at part 1 and part 2. So I'm going to give you an overview of the types of questions and feedback that will be asked of us. So in part 1, as I said, it's about these framework level issues, like how to describe non-profit organizations and who their stakeholders are. It's written in plain English, and it's pitched to be accessible to a broad audience of stakeholders interested in financial reporting, not limited to accountants. So each chapter presents a proposal and then ends with a question for, or ends with a request for general matters for comment. What that means is you're invited to comment on the general level matters presented in the chapter. So these questions tend to take the form, do you agree? If not, why not? So do you agree with what we're proposing? If not, why not? That's the general shape of those questions. So in that sense, the question is open. You've got room to express your views, but it's structured. You need to have kind of read the chapter in order to submit a comment on it. Part 2 is about these specific accounting issues, like when to recognize grant income, or whether to disclose gifts in kind, or how to measure inventory that doesn't have a sale value. It's also written in plain English, but it's pitched to be accessible to a more technical audience, familiar with accounting concepts and language. Now, in part 2, each section describes an issue and then presents some alternative treatments. Each section ends with a request for specific matters for comment. So you're invited to comment on the specific matters presented in this section. And generally, the questions take the form, do you agree with the description of this issue that as we've outlined it? Do you agree that we've got the right alternatives on the table? And then if not, why not? And which alternative do you prefer and why? So again, it's necessary to have read the section and the alternatives before you can meaningfully submit your response. And what this does is it gives us as a project really structured responses which we can analyze and feed into if you imagine we get 1,000 responses, we need to have them in a very structured format to use them well. So we've looked at the general shape. Let's have a closer look. I want to give you a taste for the kinds of questions to expect in the consultation paper. Now, I should say that the consultation paper isn't final. So what I've got here are sort of tasters of questions that have been discussed so far and are part of the draft. But please don't be upset if the final thing looks a little bit different. That's just a caveat on that. So the first chapter is all about which organizations would be considered as non-profit organizations for the purpose of this guidance. And it proposes some broad characteristics. For example, is any surplus generated from activities, is it distributed to owners or is it retained towards the mission of the organization? If it's retained towards the mission of organization, that's one of the characteristics of a non-profit organization. So I think there are 4 characteristics proposed and presented. And then the question is, do you agree with these broad characteristics? You can apply it to yourself. Say, well, do I obviously fit? Where might things be ambiguous? There's this type of organization in Afghanistan that does or doesn't meet these, have these characteristics. So you can sort of test it and apply it in your context. So if not, why not? Which alternative characteristics would you propose and why? So you've got the option to share your views there. So part 1, chapter 2 of the consultation paper is all about external stakeholders or users of the NPO financial reports and what their information needs are. So it presents a proposal. We think that most users are most interested in this type of information. Then it asks the question, do you agree that external stakeholders require information on the NPO's achievement of objectives, economy and efficiency, compliance with restrictions and regulations, and longer-term financial health? Are those the right things? If not, what not? What else should we take out? What should we put in? Then chapter 3 is all about aspects of the guidance itself, and it presents some proposals. One of the proposals is that the guidance should be accrual-based rather than cash-based or modified. And it goes into some detail about what we mean by those terms and why we've gone Sorry, I disappeared. Let me reshare. Oh, no, that's not it. Excuse me. Sorry, bear with me. Is that going to be right? Yes, okay. It's the wrong slide, but it's the right deck. So yeah, so part 3, chapter 3 is about the aspects of the guidance itself. Chapter 4 of the consultation paper is all about, oh, I've just realized, no, it's okay. Chapter 4 of the consultation paper is about which existing financial reporting frameworks should we use as a basis. So first of all, it makes the case that the IFR for NPO guidance must draw on some existing frameworks. We can't just start with a blank sheet when there are existing international accounting standards. But what's the best framework to start? Is it IFRS or IPSAS or IFRS for SMEs or a national standard? I can see some things in the chat, but I can't see what the chat says. Oh, it's okay. Somebody has to leave. Abdul, okay. So there are 3 questions in this chapter. Do you agree with the criteria that have been used to assess the suitability of different frameworks? If not, why not? What other criteria should be used? And do you agree with the scoring? So we propose a way of deciding which would be the best basis. Here are the criteria, here's the scores. And you've got the option to come back on that and say, well, these aren't the right criteria, these aren't the right scores. That we propose this instead. Then chapter 5, which is the kind of where it's all heading, puts forward a proposal for a model for developing the guidance. And in the model, we're proposing to start with IFRS for SMEs as a foundational framework, not because it's perfect, because it's actually written for for-profits. It has problems for us, but at least it's small and it's not updated very frequently. So in terms of the long-term usefulness and applicability, we feel that it's the least bad option of the 3 to base the guidance on. So the question is, do you agree with this model? If not, what alternative would you suggest? Do you have concerns about using IFRS for SME as a foundation? If so, what are they? And you've got the chance to give your opinions. So that gives you a kind of snapshot of the consultation paper part 1, 5 chapters with 2 to 4 questions per chapter. And I hope you kind of get a sense of the types of topics and questions. And if you have strong opinions about these, then great, we want to hear them. That's the whole point. In each case, you need to carefully read the relevant chapter and give a comment or response to it. And as I said, it's this structured process that enables us to give a really rich data information to feed the drafting for the exposure draft. What happens is also all the responses are analyzed by stakeholder type and by region. So if there are any really significant clashes of opinion, we can go back to people and have a sense of how to work through those issues. That's also why this project takes a long time. There's a long time frame for it. So we've looked at part 1. I'm watching the clock carefully. We've looked at part 1. Let's have a quick look at part 2. So this is now taking a deeper dive into some of the more specific accounting issues. And again, we're presenting issues here that have been discussed so far by the TAG and the PAG, but subject to any final changes that are made. So let's look at some of these types of issues. How should financial statements be presented? Should we have a balance sheet that has assets on one side and liabilities and equity in the other? Or should we have assets minus liabilities equal to funds, which actually might make a bit more sense in an NPO context? Should we have a columnar income statement where we can see restricted and unrestricted, or is it simpler to keep it as one? There's some options presented in that paper. What about the narrative reporting, the non-financial reporting about the activities of the organization? what would be some of the key elements for that report? What should go in there? How about classifying expenses? Should we be doing it by the nature of the expense? So, you know, salaries and transport and internet and whatever. Should it be according to whether it's, you know, program related or fundraising or admin? Is that helpful? Is it not helpful? What is the best way to structure the big picture of how NPOs disclose their expenses? Then the big one, income recognition and measurement. We've got so much variety now. Many people, many organizations in Uganda, for example, only recognize income, grant income, to the extent that it's spent. And any unspent is pushed forward as deferred income. In the UK, unspent income is carried forward as an unspent restricted fund balance. In some places, they do it on a cash basis. Some places they will recognize income that's receivable, even if it's not in the bank yet. There's just a world of variety. Fundraising costs, should we be disclosing them separately at all? And if we did, what would that look like? How would we define them? Making grants to others, so the grants made expenses. Assets held for social benefits. If you know your assets standards from IFRS, it's all about, impairment is all about looking at the asset's ability to generate revenue for the company in the future. Well, our assets don't generate revenue, they do something social. So how do we therefore look at impairment of assets in that context? And you can see others. And another important too here about defining the reporting entity. We have branches, we have projects and joint ventures, and what should be consolidated and what shouldn't. So there's lots of things there. And the answers to a lot of these questions really aren't obvious. There's no one right answer. So NPOs in countries without guidance are making up their own answers on a case-by-case basis. And that's why we have so much diversity and lack of consistency. So as you can see, these issues are a bit more technical in nature. I'm not going to go into each one now, but the principle is the same, that each section presents some background information and asks if you agree with the analysis. And then each section offers alternatives. I think there's up to sometimes four alternatives, and you're invited to state which one you'd prefer and why, which gives the team a really good steer as we move forward. So having looked at the structure and content of the consultation paper, and having looked at who should respond and why, hopefully you're thinking that you would like to share your opinions and perspective by responding. So how to do that? Well, we're working to make it as easy as possible for relevant stakeholders to share their views. One important aspect
Hello everyone, I think Sam has lost her connection again, so looking forward to join again. I hope it's a useful discussion, an area that is covered by this project.
Yes, yeah, it was very useful. I hope everybody has put their advices and you have been able to get the outcome that you were expecting from the meeting.
Yeah, I think what I will do as a way forward, I'll I'll be engaged with Ministry of Economy, and we have Akbar, which is working with all the NGOs. Like it's a kind of what you can say a prime center that the NGOs have in Afghanistan, the Akbar. So we will be working together with CP Afghanistan, Ministry of Economy, and as Sanaullah mentioned during the room discussion, that it should be like within the law of Ministry of Economy to require these NGOs to prepare their financial statement as per the IFRSs. So yeah, once it comes under the law, then it is applicable. But now, since the thing is that the consultation paper, it's a huge process, and Sanaullah, you know better that IFRSs implementation takes really much time, especially if these are not yet prepared or not yet designed. So the overall methodology is like PEG and TEG team will be working on developing these standards. Once these are developed, then one by one, these will be implemented within the NPO sector.
Yeah, that's very fine. Actually, I understand the problems of developing and adopting and disseminating, but we also understand that requiring it by law takes time. So I would recommend if we can go parallel with it, uh, start discussion with the regulators in order to, yeah, this is a good thing. I don't know if we have somebody here from Ministry of Economy, but as far as you said that this is an awareness plan, uh, I don't know how we will raise our voice and approach the regulators apart from this ministry of finance, so they could be in the picture too and start having, as you said, in their mind and in their concept that this is going to happen and we should start preparing for it and start recommending regulation revisions or law revisions for it. Because I understand in 4 or 5 years the standards will be developed because it's managed by a group of international and local professionals, but requiring the law to be changed requires, I mean, discussion, and we need to satisfy them and we need to give them justifications for this. So it would be good to start it as early as possible.
I think it's a very, very valid point. Yeah. So it seems like Sam is having problem in connecting. So I have shared the screen. So I'll be covering the remaining part of this meeting. I hope everyone is seeing the screen right now.
I can see.
Can I have a feedback? Can you unmute your mics, please? Unmute your mics, please. Okay, so I hope you are hearing now clearly. So basically, we are now in the same page. Like everyone has his positive feedback on this project, on this initiative that is being taken. So we are pretty much hopeful that one day we'll be witnessing in Afghanistan as well. So if there is any question from anyone, just let me know that we can record those questions or we can answer them upfront here. So if you have any question, just raise your hand so that I know. So I don't see any question. Now in the end, if you see here, we have a website for this project, and you can easily log into that. You can easily see different developments that are being taken place for the. You will get lots of information about the project and the way forward. So what I'm suggesting you all to go to ifr4npo.org on your web, and you will have the website on, and you can search whatever you want about the project, what sort of documentation have been done, about the members that are involved within this specific project. We have PEG members, we have TAG members, and in the future, like it will be really good that we get engaged, and because it's our profession, and we have to contribute for this, either it is a volunteer role, we have to have our contribution in that. So it becomes an easy and uniform sort of accounting standards, financial reporting standards. It will resolve lots of our issues. Like number one issue is the transparency that is being taken place. The other issue we have is different financial reporting from the donors, different sort of methodology for the reportings. We don't have any reporting standards yet. So there are lots of things to be discussed. So you can reach out to the this project website, ifr4npo.org, where you will get lots of information from there. The other thing, like there are different, if you, once you are get into the website, you can subscribe to the newsletter that you will be receiving on a monthly basis. Like as I mentioned, that this project is working around the world. Like it's been like 72 countries right now that are registered with this project, and one by one, like we are having meetings, we are having conferences and awareness meetings with every country. So you can get lots of information from the newsletter, the development. You can visit the website, follow IFR-NPO on LinkedIn and Twitter as well, and endorse the project aims with your logo as well. So there are lots of new things coming for this project, where you can easily see these things.
So, Zia, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, now I can hear you.
I dropped off and I've come back to find you finishing. Well done, Zia. Thank you so much for standing in for, and I apologize to everyone for my tricky internet. But thank you so much. We'll be sending a follow-up email with some of your questions and comments and those links that were in the slide deck, so that you can engage in the forum and through the website. So thank you, Zia, for being our fantastic country champion in Afghanistan. Really, really proud to be and honored to be invited to speak to you all. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for this initiative, actually, and thanks to everyone for this precious time and they had given to us for 2 hours time, and looking forward to your contribution in this part. And your voice really matters, your suggestion really matters, your advice really matters. So we'll be get engaging with all the stakeholders in Afghanistan in the future as well. We'll be working on broadening this network. We have currently, like today, 20 participants have participated, but in the future, I will be targeting more stakeholders as well. That could be like from the government side, other audit firms. We have few audit firms today, BDO, Taimur Saab, and some other guys from other firms. Thanks to them as well. So we will be working jointly, and it's a joint commitment and an effort towards a transparent and synchronized set of international financial reporting standards for the NPO sector, which will really reduce the burden and issues that we are facing these days. Either it is the government is facing the same problem, either it is the auditors, they are facing the same problem, and especially those NGOs who are working, NPOs who are working in the same sector, like their finance professionals or the accountants, chartered accountants, they are also facing problem because there isn't a synchronized or inline set of international financial reporting, which is actually common for every NGOs. So even when you are getting your job changed, you will face issue with other NGO while it is donor reporting, while it is recording a transaction and applying financial reporting on that. So it will be really useful for all of us, and being professional accountants, it's one of our duty as well to work for our standards, for our profession, to make it more common and useful for the other stakeholders as well. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Sam.
Okay, bye-bye. Have a wonderful day.
See you again.